You were not born hating yourself. That is the truth no one told you. The feeling of inadequacy, the shadow that follows you like an uninvited guest, the silent belief that something is wrong with you, that did not come from within. It was planted there, carefully nurtured drop by drop, through looks, words, silences, and unspoken judgments. And today, perhaps, you are living an entire life based on a lie about who you really are. This lie has a name. It's called shame. Not the healthy kind of shame that keeps us in check or helps us respect boundaries. No, this is toxic shame, the kind that tells you the problem isn't what you did, but who you are. It whispers in your ear that your existence is a flaw, a mistake to be hidden and corrected. You didn't come into this world feeling unworthy. That belief was taught to you. And the more you try to fit in, the further you get from the truth of who you are. Shame is not just a feeling, it's a project. It is a carefully crafted mechanism designed to suppress you, to make you shrink, to make you fit into boxes built by others. It's a tool used by religions, social systems, and even the very society we live in to turn our wild, untamed selves into something controllable. But nature did not want you to live a correct life. Nature wanted you to be free, free to create your own values, free to say yes to life with all its chaos and complexity, to be reborn as a free spirit, breaking down the false gods that shaped you. Bradshaw, years later, calls this poison toxic shame. He shows us that when this shame gets internalized in childhood, it distorts how we see ourselves. It teaches us that we are unworthy of love as we are, that we need to create a false version of ourselves just to survive. But here's the catch. This false self comes at a heavy cost. It protects you, yes, but it also traps you. And what's at stake here is not just your mental health, it's your identity. It's your ability to feel whole, to be who you truly are. This video isn't a consolation, it's a confrontation. If you're tired of pretending, of wearing a mask to protect yourself or to fit in, this is for you. If you've had enough of shaping yourself to please others, to hide parts of yourself in order to be accepted, then this is the wake-up call. We're going to dig deep into the roots of this shame that has bound you, pull down the pillars that support this false self, and show you that there is a way back, a path to healing, to reconnection, to reconstruction. But make no mistake, this journey isn't easy. It requires courage. The courage to face yourself without filters, to acknowledge the pain, and to abandon the patterns that keep you accepted but empty. Because it's only when you look at shame head-on that it begins to lose its grip on you. And in that moment, you might start to remember who you really are. And that changes everything. Shame is not just a feeling, it's a mechanism, a tool crafted over centuries to shape your body, silence your voice, and imprison your mind. The society you live in, from the religion you were raised with to the aesthetic standards that flood your social media feed, was built on the idea that you need to correct yourself, that you are by nature a walking mistake and will only be worthy of acceptance if you silence your deepest impulses. Nature saw this clearly, with unsettling clarity. For him, traditional morality, especially the Christian morality we inherited, did not arise from an ideal of goodness, but from resentment. It came from the weak who couldn't act but could judge. It was the birth of what he called slave morality, a system built to invert the values of life and glorify renunciation, sacrifice, and obedience. Instinct, power, desire, everything that pulses within you, everything that gives you life, came to be considered dirty, sinful, shameful. And the more you believed in this, the more easily you became controllable. This suppression of vital impulses created an abyss between who you are and what you were told you should be. And that abyss is called shame. A shame that makes you lower your eyes, apologize for existing, seek constant approval, even when it means betraying yourself. But nature didn't want you to be good. Nature wanted you to be whole, to affirm life in all its intensity, with lights and shadows, with mistakes and desires, with chaos and beauty. How can you affirm life if you've been taught to fear it? Shame is the castration of existence. It is the denial of your creative power. The more you try to fit into the imposed standards, whether they're spiritual purity, aesthetic perfection, or social success, the further you drift from your truth. Moral repression doesn't just crush your authenticity, it transforms it into guilt, and you begin carrying a cross that isn't even yours. As nature said, the values we worship today were forged in resentment, in the denial of life, and that's why we always feel indebted, even when we've done nothing wrong. This eternal debt, which can never be settled, is the fuel of shame. And it begins long before adulthood. It starts when you're a child, when you're told you've misbehaved, that you need to do better, that good boys don't do that. It starts when a natural impulse is punished with rejection, when desire becomes sin, when crying is ridiculed. This is the moment when the child begins to divide. Instead of developing autonomy, you learn to monitor yourself. You learn to censor yourself. You learn to hate yourself. And this shame doesn't stay a momentary feeling. It becomes an identity. It doesn't just say, you did something wrong. It says, you are wrong. From there, moral repression becomes internalized. You become your own executioner. But here's the brutal truth. All this guilt, all this weight, has nothing divine about it. It was created to bend you. And only when you recognize this does the possibility of liberation begin. But let me be clear, this liberation doesn't come from a simple, rational decision. Even when you understand that shame was imposed on you, it still lives within you. It camouflages itself in habits, in beliefs, in voices you've learned to call your own. This is where the next layer of the problem emerges. The false self, the mask you've constructed to survive. It's the persona you wear to fit in, to be accepted, to avoid conflict, to escape rejection. This is what we're going to dive into now. If this content resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe because we're just getting started. Have you ever caught yourself smiling when everything inside you is screaming? Ever pretended to be okay just to avoid bothering others? Have you ever held back your true emotions simply to keep the peace? This daily performance, this disconnection between what you feel and what you show, is not just politeness, it is survival. And according to John Bradshaw, this is the most evident symptom of something far deeper. The false self, a shield created to cover up toxic shame. Bradshaw defines toxic shame as a pathological transformation of a natural emotion into a permanent state of being. It's no longer just a feeling that arises when you make a mistake. It becomes the lens through which you see yourself all the time. You do not feel shame, you become shame. This internalized, constant perception collapses your identity. And the results? Devastating. You need to stop being yourself just to keep existing. A child who grows up surrounded by judgment, constant criticism, or emotional abandonment concludes that something is intrinsically wrong with them. They don't understand that the adults around them are wounded, limited, or absent. All they feel is rejection. And so begins the construction of an internal prison. The true self, the one that is spontaneous, sensitive, imperfect, is locked away in the basement of your psyche. In its place, the false self is born. This false self becomes an armor. It learns to smile to be accepted, to be silent to avoid conflict, to be useful to avoid abandonment. It molds itself to the expectations of its environment, like a psychic chameleon, erasing any trace of authenticity that might be deemed too much, too emotional, too bold. And over time, this adaptation is so effective that you forget you're wearing a mask. You start to believe the mask is you. But here's the cruel reality. The false self is never enough. It can be functional, even socially admired, but it is always exhausted, anxious, and disconnected. Maintaining this performance requires brutal effort. You have to monitor your emotions, recalibrate your words, contain your gestures, anticipate rejection. Toxic shame makes even the simplest act of existing feel like walking through a minefield. And living this way, day after day, is a slow death. Bradshaw describes this process as a form of silent psychological violence. He calls it soul murder, a strong term but necessary because over the years, internalized shame kills everything that is vital inside you. Spontaneity, pleasure, curiosity, self-love. In its place remains a hyper-rational subject, full of self-censorship, living on autopilot, a ghost fulfilling social functions, but completely disconnected from the vibrancy of life. And the problem is, the false self doesn't just disappear with good intentions. It doesn't dismantle with motivational quotes or self-help mantras. No, it was built to survive pain, fear, and rejection. And so the first step toward healing is recognizing its existence, recognizing why it emerged. As long as you believe your true self is defective, you'll continue wearing this armor. You'll keep living to avoid shame instead of living to live. And this is where Bradshaw's insights meet nature. Because while we need to heal the emotional wound, we also need to question the lie that created this wound in the first place. We need to confront the inherited values that taught us to hate ourselves. Nature offers us something radical, a philosophy of deconstruction, of transvaluation, of the rebirth of the free spirit. If the false self is an internal prison, Nietzsche offers the hammer to break down the bars. But this process isn't just about destruction, it's about creation. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about how the deconstruction of inherited values is not an act of blind rebellion, but rather an act of profound creative freedom. It's the essential step to stop being the reflection of someone else's gaze and finally become the author of your own existence. Imagine someone who spent years building a castle to protect themselves from pain. Each stone, each wall, a defense against the world. But over time, what was meant to be protection became a prison. The key was lost, and what remained was a person locked inside themselves, afraid to feel, to act, to be. It is at this breaking point, where psychological suffering meets its existential roots, that the ideas of John Bradshaw and Friedrich Nietzsche converge. Though they come from different fields, one a clinical therapist, the other a philosopher of chaos, both diagnose the same ailment, the rupture between the individual and their essence. For Bradshaw, toxic shame is the poison that distorts identity from childhood. For Nietzsche, it's the product of a decadent morality built to suppress the vital power of human beings. And the antidote in both cases requires courage, the courage to face the pain. Bradshaw invites us to descend into the catacombs of the psyche, where the wounded child resides, the one who was too much, who was ignored, punished, silenced. The healing process involves rescuing this child, not to protect them with more masks, but to let them live, to give voice to what has been silenced, to rebuild the bridge between the true self and the world. But this process is painful. It requires a deep dive into your darkness, your fear, your shame. Nietzsche, on the other hand, offers no emotional relief. He is not interested in comforting, but in awakening. For him, shame is the symptom of a culture of denial. Denial of the body, the instincts, the will to power. Civilization, according to him, was built at the cost of repression. And the consequence? Nihilism, a world emptied of meaning, inhabited by domesticated subjects, guilty for simply existing. Nature demands destruction. He speaks of the revaluation of values, of murdering idols, of setting fire to the foundations of inherited moral thought. Because only when the false is reduced to ashes can something new emerge.